It's 8:02. We're going to start. Welcome to Center 42. Welcome to this edition of The Living Room. My name is Robin Loon. I am one of the co-founders of the center, and also I'm its current principal consultant. For today, I am actually taking on the mantle of the editor for Citizens Review. So just to give you some context, Citizens Review is a platform that we started back in 2014, where we wanted an alternative voice assessing theatre. And we started off with really getting people to come in and to give their point of view, an informed one. But we're slowly moving Citizens Review to something that is a little bit more professional, semi-professionals. I mean, we have all really suffered the impact of the loss of the flying import, for example. Now, that was really a very important source. But we're back with something else to hopefully to fill whatever gaps that the flying import left behind, if it can ever be filled at all. So to the matter at hand, today, this edition of The Living Room, we are going to, hopefully with your participation, talk about the year in theatre, that is 2017. So before I start, hello. Oh. So please allow me to introduce our panel, our discussion panel. They comprise our citizens reviewers and also a guest from ArtsEquator. So we'll start from there. That's Yen. That's Cassidy. And that's Kathy, editor for ArtsEquator. Isaac, Christian, Jocelyn, Cordelia. So it's going to be quite casual today, and I hope you will participate. As you can see, we have boards lined up of what we are able to capture as the year in theatre. It's not an exhaustive list. I'll talk about it a little bit more later. There will be mics that will be passed around. We need the mics. Generally, everybody here could project without it, but because we are documenting this and keeping this on video, we need a clear audio capture. The other thing also is that we are currently streamed live on our Facebook page. So at some point, we are hoping that we will get some responses or questions that are posted on FB for us. Yeah? Okay, great. So we really wanted to contextualize the importances of reviews. There's an article that was published in Today Online on the 7th of December that with a very catchy headline, "Ticket sales and attendance for performing arts events plummeted." And I think the way that they went about talking about that is purely by statistics. And the interesting way that they accounted for it was, if I quote it correctly, that the fall in attendance is due to the lack of, quote, blockbuster productions in the year. Which I thought was quite curious. So the reason why I bring it up is that, again, if we didn't have qualitative, critical responses to something like this, then it will always be down to the quantitative and the quantitative and is there somebody from Today Online upstairs? Obviously. Hello. Okay. Right, so again, the whole idea of really discretionary responses and critiques. Okay, so at any point, if you want to pitch in and talk about the performances or respond to whatever that we are talking about, please feel free to do so. So, we're going to talk about 2017. We're going to start off as, this is the year of the musical. Double-digit number of musicals. It's averaging one musical per month. right? So we've never really had that. Not even in SG15 have we had that many musicals. And if ever there was a year that you needed musicals, that would have been the year, wouldn't it? Anyway, so we're going to start off with just really talking about the year musical responses. What was it about? Our reviewers are probably going to talk about the productions that they've reviewed, but also the productions that they've watched. And certainly, I invite you to kind of pitch in and tell us your point of view about musicals, okay? So, we're going to start off. Cordelia, any thoughts about the year musical? What was it like for you? How many musicals did you watch?
Okay, so the blockbuster one that I watched was Tropicana. I think it was very interesting because I think it was Harsh's first time directing. But I find that it was unfortunately subpar to some of the international musicals that I've watched. I think the formula for musicals isn't as straightforward as how you would do with any theatre production. It's not just write a script, direct it, and then get the a whole lineup of scores to sort of complement the piece. I think the whole set of music is basically the spine of the musical. So to sort of like piece it together, I don't know, as in, yeah, it was nice, it was elaborate, it was very wow, it was a lot of pizzazz, but other than that, I didn't really feel much for it. I did, however, watch a smaller scale Chinese musical. Sorry, the name just kind of slipped my mind at the moment. But it was actually a children's musical, and I was very impressed by that. And I wasn't expecting to be impressed by that, but I really was, because it was just, the song was catchy. It was supposed to, it worked in line with the whole narrative, and just really gelled together. So I think that is what a musical should really be about. So it's not about the size of it or how glamorous it is. Yeah.
It was the we question mark.
Yeah, again, just to kind of give it some context, this is, if I'm not wrong, the third time Harish has written a musical, right? The third. You know what they say about third time? So, and he wrote it, Beatrice Chia directed it, it was at the Capitol. And I think the venue was problematic. And I don't know whether if it was done in a purpose-built theater that it would have made a difference. Again, when you walk into Capitol, you see the facade and everything, it has a certain kind of allure to it. And then this particular musical, I don't know whether it will match to it. Jocelyn, you're a fan of musicals. What did you think of 2017's musical?
Okay, I watched, I think, 6 of the local musicals done by local companies. I think an observation across the board is that there just tends to be a lack of understanding of the musical form. So a bit similar to what Cordelia was saying, but so for material that's locally written, so not like Fun Home and La Cage, but yeah, those that are actually locally written, I feel that really a lot more understanding is required. Like a musical is not just a play where you put songs in randomly and expect it to work. The songs actually need to further the plot and the characterization. A lot of the time, like actually a lot of the successful musicals internationally are written and composed by the same person. People like Sondheim, of course, Lin-Manuel Miranda. So it requires so much collaboration. If the composer and the lyricist, the book writer are not the same person, which happens a lot here, I feel, you really require a lot of collaboration, a lot of understanding of each other's styles. And I think it's a bit problematic when that doesn't happen and the parts don't fit. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Let's go over to this side. Isaac, musicals, thoughts?
Well, my first thought is why this proliferation of musicals in this year? And so I went online to do some research, and I've been reading articles about interviews with Chong Tzu-Tien and all that, and with stuff like the Great War. And I realized that I have a feeling, my guess is that because Chong Tzu Qian took like 3 years to write Itzy, and The Great Wall took between 5 to 6 years before it goes on stage. So my guess was, I think the theatre makers saw that, okay, now we have the talent, with people coming out from LaSalle and NAFA, and so they started their process of writing a musical. So my general impression is that the talent has arrived, but the writing hasn't, because I think it's when they saw that we have enough actors who are triple threats who could do it, and then they started writing. So I guess we just need to give them a bit more time to experiment and a bit more time to develop in terms of the writing. Yeah, and most of the comments of what my fellow reviewers have said, I do agree.
Okay, thank you very much for the Kathy. Any thoughts about the musicals?
Yeah, I want to maybe take up, after what Isaac's point, which I think is a great point. One, there is a kind of critical mass now in terms of the talent, not just in terms of the performers, but I think also in the kind of supporting skills, right, in Singapore. Two, I think musicals have been experiencing a bit of a moment internationally over the past, 10 years?
Yeah, Hamilton.
So, So I think, that kind of plays into it. And I think the third point is this, and I can't remember, I'm trying to remember which was the scholar that said that in Singapore, the mainstream theatre is actually avant-garde. And there was talking about theatre in the 1990s, for example. So when I think of that, I think that now, in a way, the fact that we've got so many musicals is in a way a signal of an emerging mainstream theatre audience, a mainstream theatre practice. So, if, looking at it in that way, it can be seen as quite positive. But I think, the points that the previous panelists have made about the quality, for example, But then maybe there are 50 musicals that are staged internationally, and maybe one is a blockbuster sometimes.
Right.
So, maybe the ratio, maybe we're expecting too much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anybody has any thoughts from the audience about musicals this year? Ones that you enjoyed, ones that you won your 2 hours of your life back?
I want 6 hours of my life back.
I hear you. Yen, musicals.
Test? Okay, yeah. So this year I watched, La Cage, Fun Home, and Tropicana. I think I agree with a lot of the sentiments that have already been shared. I think there is this perception that musicals are like the gateway drug to theatre, and I think that's maybe what a lot of the theatre companies were trying to tap into today, especially for members of my generation. I think musicals are then how you get engaged with the medium, and so I think they were trying to tap into that. Tropicana for me, I think, was not successful in doing that for reasons that Cordelia mentioned, and I think even just dramatically, it wasn't present. Like it just, even you cut the music, you cut the songs, you just leave it as the plot and the characters. It wasn't engaging at that level. So then to throw in this other complication, which is music and songs and dancing, it's just asking so much on what is a shaky foundation.
Right.
Yeah.
So something that's related to this, do you think that there were just too many and there was audience fatigue or another musical, or because they know what the lineup is, they've already pre-chosen? Because there's a perception that musicals tend to sell better because, it's accessible, it has a song, and the plot is usually easier to follow, unless, of course, it's a Sondheim or, it's into the words or passion or something like that. Yeah, so do you think that that was the case, that there was just too many and the audience had fatigue, and after a while they just, couldn't recognize one from the other, and then the whole thing just suffered? Christian?
I think it's true. I mean, musicals do engage audiences probably a little bit quicker. It's easier to access a musical via entertaining them through dance, music, singing. And yes, there were a lot. I didn't realize there were like more than double digits this year, but Some were revivals, and things like Forbidden City, La Cage was also a revival, proved to be popular because they did very well during the first run, and that helped to bring the crowds back to watch it with a slightly different slant. But it did bring in audiences to maybe want to watch this one and see what this revival would showcase. For me, I saw two original musicals. One was Itzy by the Finger Players, and the other was The Great Wall. I do applaud companies that venture out to mount a musical. It's not easy. I mean, staging a theater piece is already very challenging, but a musical is financially huge. To get the right choreographer, the right music instructor, the right director who has the experience in directing musicals is daunting. And for these two companies, Finger Players and Glow Tape Productions, they're not huge companies. They're small. They specialize in specific theater. Finger Players have a specialty in puppetry, in puppet theater, though I think they're trying to branch out to do a little bit more adult-themed work. Glow Tape specialized in children's theater, and they mounted this incredible production. Incredible production because of its size and their scope of what they could do, of The Great Wall. And I gave them A for effort, but there were obviously some holes in The Great Wall, and which needed, even though the tumbling down scene, which was so-called the highlights, needed more work. But in any case, The Great Wall, for me, took guts to stage. And I think the people behind it, all seasoned professionals, they have been working in the theater industry for years. And even the artists involved were very passionate about it. So I think it came out because there was probably too many creative voices trying to put in what they wanted into a musical, and I think it kind of lost its way. And even though it had a very long gestation period of workshopping and reworking and rewriting, it still probably needed a bit of work, but yeah.
So I'm just going to end this section about musical with a bit of a trivia you may or may not know. 2017 was the 20th anniversary of a Singapore musical called Chang and Eng. Now, if ever there was a revival that needed to come back, that was Chang and Eng. First production, musical production from Singapore to go to Beijing. It was monumental, right? So again, it's the musical is not a new thing. We've had successful musicals before. I mean, we've seen don't know how many versions of Beauty World, you know. Again, because it keeps coming back because it's good stuff, right? So you've got Chang and Eng, and then of course, I don't know whether you remember, Ho Ming Fong's Sing to the Dawn was made into a musical, and one of the finest musicals that I've ever watched was again in the 90s, a small little musical called Kampong Amber, right? So there are all these homegrown musicals that could easily be revived, and you know. So my point here is that maybe, and I am pushing what Center 42 is promoting, maybe go back to what we already have and bring them back. There's an entire generation of people who don't know what Chang and Eng is. Yes, it's a huge cast, you need to employ children, right? Lots and lots of children and all, and two actors need to be glued together for the entire show. But, you know, it's monumental. It's one of those things that really had defined Singapore theatre in the 90s, right? So, again, anybody who wants to mount a musical, we have plenty to go back into and to really bring back up. Now, that segues into the 30th anniversary of the Necessary Stage, which happened in 2017. So again, we're going to talk about the things that had defined, so the musical, because of its just sheer numbers, and Necessary Stage, 30th anniversary, right? So plenty of revivals, plenty of new stuff, and a lot of the work, and of course, of really retrospective of the things that Necessary Stage have done, right? So just really going to spend some time talking about, so I'm just going to ask the reviewers here. Cassidy, did you catch any of the Necessary Stage shows?
No, yeah, I didn't manage to catch any TNS shows this year. Yeah, but I did catch the Esplanade, the studios.
Ah.
Yeah, and they did. They were looking all at Harish Sharma's works this year. Yeah, and I managed to catch Discord and others.
Yes.
I think, which was especially really just a solid piece of work. I think really mounted because of the performances. I think there was Thomas Pang and Neo Hai Pin and the last actor whose name kind of escapes me for now, but yeah. Sorry? Yeah, it's Pavan. Yeah, Pavan J. Singh. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so it was just a really nice kind of occasion to kind of explore and look back at the kind of issues that were pertinent back then, and just seeing how timeless in a way Sharma's work has kind of remained over these past few years. Yeah, and just seeing how the kind of stage directions have really kind of solidified his play. Yeah, and I think it was a very valiant effort. Yeah, and I thought it was a really nice kind of look back at the past, but also kind of looking at how we are right now and how these issues just kind of continually kind of need to be discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think was very, very good. Yeah.
So do you think that they had when Discord and Others was first staged, it didn't meet with too much controversy? I don't think it was, but the world being what it is today, do you think that the race issues are one still pertinent to contextualize well for discussion in 2017, or was it more a nostalgic walk back to, these are the race lines back in the day?
I think it was a bit of both. Yeah, and it definitely did have that kind of nostalgic edge to it, which was definitely part of the nature of the play. Yeah, but yeah, it was just, and I mean, looking to another play I watched this year, which was the one with, I can't seem to remember it now, but yeah, I'll talk about it later. Yeah, but it's just, I just felt like these issues just remained really, really prevalent. Yeah, and just seeing it played on stage again and watching these metaphors, which I think were maintained in the original production as well, was just very interesting to a whole new generation, which I feel that I'm part of. This new generation of theatre goers, like looking and watching these performances that might not have changed much since the past, and still being able to touch on these topics that are important. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to Kathy. Kathy is the editor for ArtsEquator, and they did quite a bit of a coverage, interviews, specialized articles on the necessary stage. What's your take on it?
Just bringing a kind of regional perspective to it, Necessary Stage turned 30, and Five Arts Centre in Malaysia turned 32 years ago, right? And there are actually links and relationships between those two companies as well. And I think when I looked at the celebration of the Necessary Stage put together, for me it wasn't just about one company. As an insider, outsider myself, it felt like it was a celebration of Singapore theatre. Because if you look at the spawn, right, that, the two of them have actually, released into what is now the Singapore ecosystem, it's multiple. So you've got people at many different kind of generations and age kind of groupings in the system now who are change makers in their own ways and innovators in their own ways that actually can trace their lineage back to the Necessary Stage.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an important thing that they did, and in the way that they programmed their celebration, a lot of it was releasing, and so not just a showcasing, but demonstrating in a way that it's about kind of creating and then letting go. So the works then move into the hands of, for example, studio series, the 5 youngish directors worked on it, and the fact that Harish was directing for the first time, again, I think it was quite a pointed choice to make this year, because again, it's kind of, you're celebrating me, but I'm still going to try something new. I'm not stuck in one mode. So, I thought those things were really important. I saw, what did I see? I saw Those Who Can't Teach. I saw With and Without, Fundamentally Happy, Hope, yeah. So Those Who Can't Teach was interesting because I went with some people who had seen it before and spoke to people who had seen it, and I think it was very, very different direction,
Yes.
right? And I think actually we had a talk
Yeah.
about it, right? But of course, when I experienced it, I thought, well, this is something that Alvin's directed for a completely different audience,
Yes.
right? It was, it was snappy. It was really kind of tried to kind of touch on issues that were current. It was depressing that some of the issues that were, the kind of pressure of school is still existent, if not even higher now. I don't know if some of the characters, I think one or two characters I felt were really kind of quite racial stereotypes.
Yes.
And so that didn't age well. So those were, I think, some of the things that struck me about it. Our entry point in terms of just as an editor and what I was looking for was to try and bring Alvin a little bit more to the fore, because we all know Alvin and we all, he's a presence in our lives professionally, if not personally, for a lot of you. But when we were looking at all the press writings and so on, Harish is very much written about, but also, and that's quite natural because he's the playwright. He has a physical body of work that academics and scholars and critics engage with, actors engage with. But Alvin, who is a presence, hasn't really been written about as much. And so we tried to find, an entry point into that. But even in trying to find someone who could just see him as is, that was difficult because everyone has a relationship with Alvin, And so we worked with Felipe, who has worked with Alvin, but then, using that relationship and not hiding it, but using that relationship to talk about Alvin was the entry point. And then we did some reviews of, so, sorry.
Now, just wanted to add on to what Kathy was talking about. Again, because I'm of that certain vintage and pedigree, I have actually, and back in the 80s, I was a voracious theatre goer, and also because it was cheaper. I actually watched the first production of Those Who Can't Teach at the Substation. And that was one of the first few productions that were actually staged at the Substation when it first opened. And Those Who Can't Teach is a completely different version from that. So Harish, I spoke to Harish, and Harish said that it was impossible to update that because that was a 90s play. And if you do that, it's awkward, so he decided to take the premise of teachers in a school, and he completely wrote a completely different play, and hence, the whole social media, which of course did not happen in the 90s. So very significant productions that affected a lot, and together, so this was about the teachers, and then several years later, you wrote something about mental patients, as we all know. They continue to talk about these issues that impact us. So again, just to give you some background on that. Jocelyn, did you watch any necessary stage productions or anything that was, apart from Tropicana? By Harisha.
Excuse me. So I think I watched a few. Actor 40, Tropicana, and Those Who Can't Teach, and Drip and Will Fall, closer to the in the second half of the year. Yeah, I don't know. They were very, very different. I guess just echoing what Kathy has already said, it felt like, or rather the whole year's kind of curation of what TNS was doing, it did feel like really a celebration of local, theatre and such a, because what I was seeing was really very, I can't even draw a thread. Like if there's something that I maybe, or rather something that's a bit confusing for me was then the kind of, I didn't see any thread linking the whole year of work that was coming out of that. I did enjoy, if you're talking about specific works, I did enjoy Actor 40. Pretty long ago, so it's a bit hazy now, but just I liked that it was, well, that Haresh was writing in one language and then it was performed in something else. So rather multiple languages rather, and that was very, very interesting. Probably the first time I'd seen that. Yeah, so not really much else to comment on, I guess.
Thank you. So again, if you have anything to add or anything you want to, even rebuke us with or rebuff us with, please feel free to do so. And with Stream Live, if you want to put a question on FB, you can do that too. Right. So we're going to move on to something that the citizens reviews, and I wanted to put the spotlight on starting from this year, and it will continue on through the following years, what we call productions by independent collectives and emerging groups. So these would include, small productions, new theater companies, school productions, tertiary institutes, art school. These are the ones that don't get covered. So one of the primary function of reviews is actually, and this is something that we don't look at very often, is actually historical documentation, right? So it kind of like, if it provides kind of a documentation of what actually happened that year. So apart from it providing qualitative commentary, it is also, and the larger point, becomes a document to show. So if it doesn't get covered, that production disappears, right? Especially small productions that don't have budgets. So I felt that it was important for them to be covered. And so as part of the brief given to the writers, that they all had to watch at least one such production, at least one independent production or a school production or a school production. And all of them also had to watch one production that is not in English. So again, that's part of the training that they do, how do they deal with subtitles and so on and so forth, right? So this is one. So I'm quite excited to hear what the reviewers have to say and their encounter with these small productions. So we'll just call them small, emerging groups and collectives, right? So things like crossings. So Isaac, you watched quite a few of those.
Yes, I actually watched 3. I watched Crossings, The Memory of Water by Wag the Dog Theatre, which is a new collective, and Dear Monsieur by NUS Chinese Drama as part of the NUS Arts Festival. In terms of, unfortunately, all 3 of them had quite a few problems. And so I will start with NUS Chinese Drama, because for that production, it was based on a Russian play called Elena. I can't pronounce the name, but it was based on this Russian play whereby the students visit the teacher on the pretext of a social visit, but actually try to cajole her into handing over the exam scripts so that they can make sure that they score well enough to enter into university. For that show, and especially as a NUS Arts Festival Commission, in a way, they are mentored by Li Xie, and Li Xie was generally quite hands-off because they had a student director and all that. But unfortunately, I went in there thinking that, okay, I'll just focus on the acting because, I don't expect, the production values to be very high or anything like that. But actually, the production values are better than the acting, much, much better than the acting. And I was quite surprised by the production values, actually. And firstly, regardless of whether you're a student group or how much experience you have, there are very basic things in terms of acting, like responding to your fellow actors on stage, even though you have no lines. But they don't. They all had this default thing by just looking at the side, and when it's their lines, then they start animating and speaking to actors. And also the whole team decided to update to a modern day context. And so the students are trying to cajole the teacher into handing over a key card so they can break into somewhere and accessing the papers. And that has a big problem because if it's a modern day, why would a teacher be threatened, especially when you have so many, communication devices or anything like that? I assume in the original play, maybe a teacher lived in somewhere rural and the exam papers were locked in a safe, so the teachers had nowhere to go. But they just updated it thinking that it would be accessible without thinking of the logical consequences of what happens if you actually update it. So I felt that the mentor should have, say a few words rather than, being so hands off. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Small productions, Yan, did you watch any? Any one of them impressed you?
Yeah, I watched One Man, Two Governors, and I participated in creating two smaller productions. And I think, a hot question on my mind this whole year was, do we judge aspiring groups to a different standard as we would professional groups? I don't have a clear answer, but I think it is within the realm of possibility that it can be very entertaining work. For example, I watched One Man, Two Governors by Stage Club, and it was a very fast-paced, frenetic, a lot of people were acting for the first time, but it managed to move past that and try and anchor it in something at least that was entertaining. So I think that's, at the very least, that's the bar that we have to set for an aspiring work or an emerging group, regardless of experience. These things are still possible. Yeah.
Thank you. Part of that is also we also bring in amateur players in community theatre as part of that particular subgroup that we wanted to cover. So again, all of the reviews are available on center42.sg at one of our platforms, and feel free to browse and have a look and as and when. So, no value judgment terms here. All right. So here we are at this part. This is not the Live Theatre Awards, obviously. So we're just going to go down the line and get the reviewers to just talk a little bit about what they thought was a disappointing production and maybe why it was disappointing. All right, we start with Cordelia.
Okay, so I watched Dragonflies by Pandemonium it was part of SIFA, and I think it was the first Pandemonium production that I watched that wasn't already scripted. So it didn't take someone else's script, and it was a collaboration with Stephanie Street. So I was actually, I had some hope for that, right? I was like, okay, maybe something new. Maybe they would play a bit, devise a bit. But I felt that it went back to the same formula of being very aesthetically pleasing. So it was very lovely, nice staging, expensive lights, of course. And you're blown away, right, for the first 5 minutes. But then you realize that it drones on for 2 hours without intermission. And the narrative spans, I think, a few years. It kind of skips, and then it goes across three countries, and then I don't know, I just felt like it could have been cut into half. Like I should have been there for an hour, not 2. So, I don't know, I think for the price of the tickets, it was, because when you review, you look at how affordable it is as well for the general audience. $70 for a ticket, I wouldn't watch that, yeah.
Okay, Jocelyn.
Yeah, pretty much agree with that. But I would say, for me, the most disappointing production was probably Tropicana, for reasons already mentioned. But yeah, because I am partial to musicals myself, and for me, I felt that the based on the material, based on the subject matter, it had everything going for it. So, there's nostalgia, there's really a chance to revive a part of our history, it's in a nightclub, so there's a ready excuse to break into song and dance. So I was like, what could go wrong, right? But I was to find out, lots could go wrong. So yeah, it just didn't understand the form. Again, one of the most obvious examples, I thought, yeah.
Tropicana.
Okay, for me, I think the most disappointing production of the year for me was the first production I reviewed, which was Prism by Toy Factory Theatre Ensemble. Toy Factory is quite an established theater company. They've been around for 25 years, I think it is. And this was their first play of the season. Not that they've actually done much this year, but I was hoping that they would have more stuff to see. So Prism wasn't going to be the most disappointing production for them. But it just lacked a certain... I mean, the play is about urban renewal, right? It talks about what happens when you get rid of an iconic piece of land or building that has some sort of cultural purpose or meaning to people, to build something new. And I think it had sort of correlation with what's happening in Singapore. We're knocking out old things to build new things, and what's happening to our heritage. And this piece was actually a restaging of this play back in 2003 for, I think it was an international tour. They went to Japan, they had a huge budget. So this was a restaging of that play. And it became very murky, it just lacked direction. It had established artists in there, but they were all doing things strangely and incoherently to me as the reviewer. And it was 90 minutes without an interval. And that was long, and I really felt the pausing and the dead air. You could also sense the audience feeling something's not happening here. So for me, it just was a disappointing start to the reviewing season for me.
Isaac.
It's a bit difficult to nominate like the most disappointing because certain shows are, it's just apples and oranges. So how I went about this is, my criterion for most disappointing is you should know better, because those shows are more frustrating than those that maybe because they have lack of experience or training, right? So for my most disappointing, bearing in mind of my criterion, is actually Under My Skin by Alessandra Fell, which was part of the M1 Fringe Festival. It had a lot of going for it because it tried to explore postnatal depression, but the thing is that I felt that it didn't explore postnatal depression specifically, and it was bogged down by this superfluous dialogue, which, because the dialogue was stuff like, I felt that I'm under a pane of glass and everyone's walking over me, but that is like, it feels like generic depression. I mean, people who have experienced depression in one form or another, I mean, it could have fit into any shows about any other sort of depression. But what was very frustrating was because the performances are so good, and so because it was largely a physical theatre piece, why have dialogue at all? Because, the performance with especially Risman Putra, where in a scene where the mother gives birth, and he comes out, and he has this very grotesque physicality, which is actually quite wonderful, because this show was actually developed in Center 42, so there are a lot of documentation of the process. So I was watching, the interviews with the director, and so he came out as a baby, and his physicality really feels and looks like a baby. And there I was watching, and I thought that the stage crew sprayed some water on him to make his body moist or something, like a newborn baby. But actually, no, when he came closer, he was dry, and I'm like, gosh, that sort of physicality, And so since, Alessandra's specialty is in physical theatre, and we have such great performers, I thought that you should really focus on the physical parts. What sort of stage pictures can you create, with your bodies? And another thing about not exploring postnatal depression specifically is because, apart from there's one portion where it's just shadow play where the mother and the son, make certain shapes. But after that, we don't really see, because the first reaction I had was, postnatal depression. Some people were so affected that they would actually hurt their child. And as a guy, it's unimaginable for me, no matter how imaginative I am, or no matter how, fanciful hallucination I have, it's impossible to imagine. And so I wanted to feel that quality, but it didn't come out. So which is why, you should know better. Are you getting pregnant though? Sorry, I haven't been pregnant. No. No, so...
Kathy.
So I'm going to use you've used the word disappointing, and so the term disappointment as in high expectations, which would disappoint, were dashed a little bit. It would have to be becoming graphic. I think, along with everyone, because of the people behind it, because of the topicality of it, because I have a lot of respect for the artists that were involved, I had very high expectations, and I was disappointed. I think what I try to do when I go and see a show is to understand what the artist is trying to do, and and then I judge them based on whether they were able to achieve it or not, and try to understand what were the impediments to that, right? And in this case, I couldn't understand what the intention and the purpose of the work or the artist, what was she trying to communicate to me? So that was I think that just made then some really interesting parts of the show that worked in isolation, but overall, I could not grasp on to what what the artist was trying to kind of say and communicate. So, yeah, that was for me disappointing. I'd actually love to see that work again,
Yeah, I want to just maybe, again, a lot of the shows that a general feel, and feel free to disagree with me, felt that they weren't quite ready to be staged. I mean, you could see that there's something really good in there, but they just needed either some time or input. I hesitate to use the word dramaturg because that seems to be the band-aid for all ills. Bad production, get a dramaturg, right? No, but I think that maybe that's something that we should reflect on, that when it's not ready, then if you put it out in the public, then it will always be remembered for it being almost there, but not quite. Hence the disappointment. Yeah, just something for us to think about. Cassidy.
Yeah, I mean, really kind of going on with what Kathy has said and what Robin has said as well. This may come as a surprise, but actually, what I felt was most disappointing this year was actually Off Kilter. Yeah, Ramesh Meyapan's Off Kilter, because he he wasn't in Singapore for a while, for a few years. He did Butterfly in 2014, if I'm not wrong. And then he did Snails and Ketchup before that, which had really glowing reviews. Like, reading reviews of Snails and Ketchup, I really did want to, be there and just watch the kind of theatrics that Meyapan has come up with, because if I'm not wrong, Mr. Matthew Lyon, wrote a review for Snails and Ketchup, yeah. And I caught Butterfly in 2014, which was really narratively really coherent, really kind of cohesive, and just the stage play was really amazing. Yeah, and just having that kind of expectation and kind of walking into Off Kilter. I understand that Off Kilter as a performance is very different, and he wants to talk about, people with mental illnesses. He wants to, kind of convey the whole feeling of it, but it just felt that the medium that he used, which was illusion or magic, didn't quite sustain throughout the whole, duration of the performance. Yeah, and I think Jocelyn's review of Off Kilter, right? Yeah, it's quite articulate and pretty much sums up how I feel about it. So yeah, you guys should go check it out. Yeah, if you guys, I
The
know this sounds
review.
weird.
The show is over.
Yeah, but
Don't go to 7213, the show's over. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
though?
please.
Which night did you go and see it?
It was a matinee show, if I'm not wrong, Saturday or Sunday matinee. It was an extra add-on, I think, because it sold out.
I mean, only because I saw two nights. I happened to see the first night and the second night. And the first night was really quite magical. And then the second night, there just seemed to be a lot of technical difficulties. So it was a very different show. So, I mean, that was my experience.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Just like to jump in, I watched the first and the second night too. So I was reviewing it kind of based on both.
Okay.
But I actually preferred the second night with the technical difficulties. Yeah, I did. Somehow I think there was something that seemed quite precarious.
It's off kilter completely.
Yeah, and people who didn't know it was a technical error thought that, wow, this is brilliant. Yeah, just interesting, different views. Yeah.
Yen.
To avoid bringing up Tropicana,
Oh, go on.
I think everything that needs to be said has been said. So I'll cheat a bit and talk about my second most disappointing production. So I misspoke earlier. I actually watched two emerging groups this year, and the other one was Human Plus, and it was staged at SRT, and it was a struggle to get through. To be very frank, it was an hour plus of philosophical rants about whether robots are better than people or AI are better than robots, and it was. I think what made the whole experience more disappointing is that I watched it, I think, on a Saturday night in the SRT Theatre, the Kuala Ram Chan Rai venue, with maybe 8 other people. That was really, it added another layer to to an experience of a production I was already not enjoying, was that so few people were suffering with me. The thing is it was also disappointing because it is sort of a hot topic issue, and there are interesting things to be said. And I think the playwright/director did have interesting things to say about it, but he just hadn't figured out how to make that dramatically work yet. So yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you very much. The most exciting, okay. Right, so we're going to do it the other way around. So 8 people suffered with you. What is the most exciting production you watched in 2017?
Okay, I'm gonna cheat again. I'm gonna answer with a subset of productions. I think the productions that really excited me this year were the ones that were really challenging. So those were things like offending the audience, becoming graphic. For me, actually, I really enjoyed becoming graphic. So Poop, Art Studio, these shows are the ones that really stuck with me, and I think it's also like I watched a lot of very polished productions this year as well. I watched Hand to God, Constellations, Fun Home, very like technically sound pieces of work, but they didn't stick with me the way these other works did, in how they were bold and they were willing to push what the medium can do and asking, well, are there things it should and shouldn't do? So those are the productions that really stuck with me. Yeah.
Okay. Cassidy.
Yeah, so I think the most exciting production for me this year, or rather exciting in the sense that I'm really just pumped to see much more from this particular company, is actually Cakes Running with Strippers, or Thou Shalt Not. Yeah, this year, which was, it was exciting in the sense that the entire way was constructed. We had really little information of kind of the location of the place, what was the content of the performance, all these kind of things, and just being in the space and experiencing it. I think it was great that Kick has all of their their usual theatrical plays. They did Being Hara Sharma and all that, but they have this Running with Strippers or Thou Shalt Not this year particularly was this kind of it just really felt that it was them in their kind of natural state, without boundaries, without without the restrictions of a theater, they just do what they want. Yeah, and it's great art. It's just they have all these collaborators. There's Cyril Wong. They have Rizman Putra doing this wonderful kind of dance, half Buto performance, talking about how he got into the art form, and it was just really raw and really kind of just groundbreaking. Yeah, kind of that kind of boundary breaking feel that I really got from King, which you don't always get from their plays that are stuck in the theater, Yeah, so and they've got this really good team of artists together, and I think I just really want to see more of that from them. Yeah.
Kathy?
Thanks. Without by Lu Zihan was my favorite. I thought it was it ticks all the boxes of the things that I'm interested in, right? It's about archive, it's about work that explores the process of both making. It is historical, it's practice, it's research. So I all those things put together excited me. But sometimes the concept can be really exciting, and then the experience can be quite disappointing. In this case, it wasn't like it was a fantastic polished work, but I think that it made me really question all of the issues in the process of making, as well as watching it, and the aftermath of the performance, because it's a work that requires background knowledge. It is a work that really demands of you as an audience member to invest time, not just in these 2 hours that you're in the space, but time to actually do a bit of thinking and reading about it. So I loved it for that, for those reasons. And I think the idea of this circulation of ideas was also very interesting to me. You know, it's Paddy's words that become Harish's play, and then when Paddy performs it, he discards some of the strictures of the text, and so he becomes someone that is not playing the script, but it's his story. And I think that Zahan then worked with that in using Janice and using the video and all of that. So that work really excited me. It troubled me in terms of just there's some ethical issues, which I mean I know that Zahan really engages with all of these things, but as I said, I liked it because it made me think about these things. So the ethical issues that are interesting. It also signaled, I think, something that I've noticed this year, which is a number of works that are self-referential to about the arts. So you've got Artis Res Publicae, which used Eleanor Wong's play. You've got Being Harish Sharma, which used Harish's play work, and then this. And this, again, it's kind of looking at the canon of, well, because we're young, you're in the process of, in looking at the canon, you're actually creating the canon, right? So all of those things, I think, together, exciting.
Isaac. Oh, just, again, trivia. Without, I'm proud to say, was originally developed at Center 42. Anyway, Isaac.
Well, I'll have to disagree with two of my colleagues here and say that the most exciting for me was actually Off Kilter by Ramesh Meyapan. I think firstly because it was my first time encountering Ramesh's work, so I do not have any other references to compare it to. But firstly, his absolute mastery of his physicality that's reminiscent of slapstick or even stop motion. There's one portion where he sort of melts into a certain pose, and it reminded me immediately of like stop motion. But one key merit, I think, is that the most refreshing aspect in terms of dealing with mental illness. A lot of shows, they tend to go for the overly dramatic, pull my hair out, woe is me sort of aspect. But he really deals with the tedium of the quotidian, Sometimes it's just difficult to just get through the day. It's not just, it's not just me wanting to kill myself every day, but sometimes it's just really wanting to get up and just go to work or go to school. And so that the whole repetition, to some people may not enjoy the repetition, but I think it really emphasizes that difficulty with just getting through the day sometimes. But in reference to Jocelyn's review, let me see. She felt that the illusions are gimmicky, but again, it really draws us into someone just trying to figure out things, and things are just, because a lot of the illusions are, pencil. Various things in his house are multiplying, or certain things are disappearing, or even the whole set tilted at one point. So it's just all these illusions is a quick way to actually show us what it's like for him, for Joe Kilter, when things go off kilter for him. And also it balances out. It's not overly heavy. Sometimes the little tricks are quite funny, and that allows people to ease gently into it, because if it's overly heavy, you'll just switch off like, no, I can't take this anymore. You distance yourself from it. But that said, I agree insofar as because the illusions were all packed towards the second half of the show. So if it could space out or have a little bit more variety, then maybe it would be a nicer balance, because if it's packed towards the second show, it feels like, oh, this is the magic portion of the show. So that's my little critique for Off Kilter.
Oh, critic. Okay, Christian.
I think it's a bit of a tie. I found Art Studio by a 9 Years Theatre to be the most exciting production for me. Coming from somebody who doesn't speak Chinese, I found it thoroughly engaging. to struggle through surtitles and watching this incredible group of ensemble of actors performing this epic of a story that spans decades of Singapore's history, you know, through a group of students that attend an art class and how they live their lives through the tumultuous period of Singapore's independence and prior to that and post-independence. I liked the use of the viewpoints that I think Nelson and his team of actors of 9 Years Theatre incorporated into the piece. It's not an easy thing to do. It's a very disciplined type of actor training form. I don't usually know. Before seeing this, I didn't know how viewpoints actually could work on stage. But seeing it, I just saw the actors so committed and disciplined in the piece. It was a 3-hour piece, but you are thoroughly engaged and absorbed in that piece throughout those 3 hours. And the other one, which is a close second, is Frago by Checkpoint Theatre. I'm excited by what I see of Checkpoint Theatre. I think they do great work. This is a new writer, or a fairly new writer, that is being developed and groomed, I think, by Huzier. And what I liked about it was you saw Frago is about a group of reservists who are going through their last high-key training in their national service commitments. And you see something very different from what you usually hear about national service. You see people who have gone through the cycle and the lives after they've gone through their usual 2-year or 2.5-year commitment, what they have to go through and where they have gone after they've left national service. And I like the subtlety, the honesty, and the bromanship of these men that was touching, because they act all tough and cool, but there's a lot of emotion and hidden sorrow inside some of them, and I was really taken by that. So Frago was also a key highlight for me.
Thank you. Again, I have to contextualize. I have to be very honest. 2017 was not a very exciting year in theatre for me. For various reasons, and more of the same, nothing really exciting. There was a production that I was vaguely excited by, because it was direct, simple, and really was a very, very good use of theatricality. And I'm taken to plays that deal with that. And also it had a particular element which I am increasingly more passionate about, which is the disappearance of our everyday languages. This production is called Grandmother Tongue. And for somebody who is not a born or native, I learned Teochew, but I learned it, I spoke it. I speak it, and it was something in the very basic makeup of 3 actors, and it was literally a table, 2 chairs. And the very simple use of theatricality, apart from the fact that it was mic'd, everything else was perfect in terms of how it conveyed the theatre. Jaylene, Shou Chen, Ray, very competent actors. The directing was a little bit not so assured. The text tended to move towards the melodramatic and the maudlin, but all that was secondary to the fact that it championed the disappearance of the everyday languages. And that, to me, excited me, because, again, there was one part of the production where the subtitles got switched off. And then if you didn't, correct? So then you just sit there and you just ask yourself, what the hell is happening? And then you get to realize the world that the grandmother was in when she goes somewhere and everybody speaks English and she doesn't understand. So a simple turn like that really does. It's not fanciful. It's absolutely not fanciful. So I like the fact of the simplicity, its directness, and it talked about an issue that all of us take for granted, but it is disappearing, and if you don't speak it, at some point it will completely disappear.
I was going to say exactly the same thing that you just said. Grandmother tongue, yeah, for the exact same reasons. So I'm just going to cheat and But very, very close second, or actually something very, very similar, was one of the vault programs that was put up here, which was Nelson's directing of two, Kwa Pao Kun played the two monologues. Yeah, for similar reasons, because the two Kwa Pao Kun monologues were translated into Cantonese and Teochew. So Coffin was done in Teochew, and No Parking Odd Days in Cantonese. And again, yeah, so I'm also Teochew. I don't speak it though. Wish I did. But and I understood no Cantonese. I understand no Cantonese. But it was just such a touching, very, very, very touching. For some reason, I don't know why. I mean, I guess maybe because it's locally written and by someone who really is so, so much into the local culture. And then hearing those monologues in dialect was just wow. I had no words actually when I left. Yeah. So and then Grandmother Tongue had a kind of similar impact. Yeah. And I think these small scale productions go to show that you don't need big complicated sets and lighting to do impactful work. So yeah.
Cordelia?
Okay, it sucks to be last because everyone kind of said everything that I wanted to say. I think I was actually quite impressed by Ramesh's Off Kilter. I was also very impressed by Grandmother Tongue. But since those have already been covered, I was actually surprisingly impressed and very excited about. Okay, I didn't know I was going to be excited until I watched it. By ITI's final year project, they had a showcase. And I remember there was one girl, I think her name's Uma. Her name's Uma. And she did a performance in a round. And theater in a round is very difficult to do because ultimately what she got us to do is to sit around her, and she just came in, and it was just really a one-man show, right? And she was dressed in a traditional Indian outfit. She was telling a story. She was dancing, she was singing, and it was just so interactive. And it was really engaging for that maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And I walked out, thinking like, wow, there was no set, right? There was no special effects, no lights, nothing. And she just blew us away. She really brought us into a world. And there was never one moment where I felt like she was disengaging, because even though I was here and her back was facing to me, there was always something that was happening. I think that was very powerful. Something else that I didn't know I was going to be excited about until I watched it was The Wee Question Mark by the Theatre Practice. So this was actually just across the road. It was a Chinese children's musical. So I used my subpar Chinese that I haven't touched in secondary school, and I went in, like screaming children. So there's just parents and children. I'm the only adult there, and it was so awkward, okay? I went there, and it was just really amazing. They used shadow play, and for once, the music or the lyrics made sense. And I thought it was going to be one of those kiddie nonsense, right? It's just nothing lah. Like they just teach you like ABCs or something, right? I'm just like, why am I even reviewing this? But it actually touched on many philosophical questions, and it was very existential, and I was quite surprised. So like some of the lyrics, it was like, what's in a name? So basically all the characters, they've got like Toh Hao and a question mark, exclamation mark, full stop, everything. So they all met this old man that is nameless, and they're all arguing, they're trying to figure out what his name is and who he is and what his identity is. So they're actually really asking the children, what's in a name? Does your name represent who you are? What are your values and these kind of things? So I walked away like learning a lot, and I also walked away like singing the Chinese songs. So that just kind of made a lot of impact on me.
Right, 2018, looking ahead. Just again, just something for us to look forward to in 2018. What is it that's coming? What is it that you're looking forward to? And so, since it sucks to be last just now, you start. What do you look forward to 2018?
I look for, quite unfortunate I won't be here to catch it, but I was actually looking forward to the revival of The Moon is Less Bright. So it was a very, very old play back in the 60s, right? Yeah, I studied this. But yeah, and it was, it's very weird because the farmers were speaking like polished English, and you're like, what is going on? And then it was just a very awkward scenario. It was just when it was the first wave of playwrights, and they were just fledgling, it was coming up. So the very fact that it's like kind of like a modern, a company, and in this century wants to do something like that and revive a play like that, it's just very baffling, but it's also quite exciting to see what they're going to do with it. Yeah.
So that, the Mooney says right as well, and M1 Fringe, I guess because they're changing the way they frame the theme this year. So just looking forward to how that works out. Yeah.
I'm actually looking forward to the Wild Rise Singapore Theatre Festival. Don't know what the lineup is yet, so that always is quite an exciting prospect. So that's what I'm looking forward to, and I hope once they tell us when the shows are and where the tickets are, I'll be buying them.
I'm actually not so sure what is lined up for next year, but I think one thing to look out for, I guess, would be the Singapore International Festival of Arts, curated by Gaurav Kripalani, who is the new festival director for the next 3 years, I think. So that would be interesting to take a look. And I think looking at small companies, it's one of the topics we discussed. I mean, some of it is hit, some of it is miss. I mean, but what it is there are people that are investing their time and passion to do something, and you see that passion come out, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in not so good ways. But I like the fact that you have a new group of people generating theater, art, and communicating that to a group of people, and I look forward to seeing more smaller shows too.
Yes, SIFA as well, because SIFA having Ong Ken Seng has such a strong stamp on it, so I'll see how it evolves under a new direction. But also the staging of Michael Chang's play, Private Parts, next year, because I would like to see how they approach it, especially in this climate that we are in right now. Yeah.
SIFA as well, and Singapore Theatre Festival.
Yeah, M1 Fringe. Yeah, because Amanda Heng is kind of hitting up the whole theme, and it's just nice to see a change of pace, change of theme. Yeah, as with SIFA as well. Yep.
Yeah, SIFA. It's going to be exciting to see what happens. Yeah.
Right. Any last comments from the floor? Questions for us? Yes.
Sorry, I'm a bit slow.
No, we'll bring the mic to you so that we can capture the audio. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm a bit slow. Going back to musicals, and most of you are looking forward to SIFA, but you didn't mention what I thought was very impressive this year, which is Trojan Women. Is that not a musical? Or is that so foreign?
No, it was on my list.
Yeah.
None of us could tell really what's really good or not.
I think it is an opera, technically, because of the kagok. Yeah. So
Right.
it's not a musical per se. So it's
I see.
the genre. There's no matching of the Asian genre to this, but the closest would be an opera. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the other one is a comment. I think this year I spent more time going to plays that was Malay, as in Malay language and Malay actors, and I have to say I'm really impressed. I've liked it a lot. Yeah, I think this one, is it called
Angkat.
Actor?
Tita Kamatra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like what they do.
Yes, they have a new show coming up. Any other comments?
Hi, sorry, yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes. We were talking quite about musicals and we didn't really get around talking about it in more detail earlier, but a lot of these successful musicals from overseas that have proven to be successful tended to be works that get a lot of redoing, relooking, re-editing, taking songs out, putting stuff in, stuff like that. And then there is a general realization that we don't see that happen with Singaporean work enough. So, I mean, for me, one of my most disappointing productions this year wasn't Tropicana. Tropicana actually graded average to good for me. But I thought that things like Detention Katong, that stood out as very raw and very, it could use quite a bit of reworking as far as those are concerned. And I think the general sentiment I have is that we've seen a lot of work put up, musicals or otherwise, but we don't see a lot of them put up more than once. And that opportunity to build on what is very interesting raw work with potential is not happening enough. Even things like Kampong Amber, which have got very extreme reviews in both directions, would be worthy of a revisit. And I don't know when if that will happen at all. And that's something for us to look forward to.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? I think the comment is extremely valid, but again, judging from the economics that run the industry in Singapore, I'll give you a very good example. One of the recent Broadway hits, well, not recent, it was last year, is a small musical called Dear Evan Hansen, which is a very small musical that had a bit of a long run off Broadway. And during that time, it continued to evolve and change. And then it got noticed, and then because the industry in the US and New York worked that way, then it was brought up to Broadway itself. But it had a long off-Broadway run. In the same way that in London, you have the off-West End, you have small venues where they will continue to run. So the musicals need time, not just out of the rehearsal room, and it also need time to actually run, for it to actually find out how the audience is taking this, how the audience is not taking that. So unfortunately, the economics of our industry being what it is, that just is not economically viable. Ask any producer, that's just not economically viable. We can have a long gestation period, but to actually have an off run, which is a different set of costs in itself, which is a different cost from just going to the rehearsal room and just running in that particular way, right? So I think but I'm fully with you on this, and other musicals, I would love to see Sing to the Dawn come back, Kampong Amber come back, right? And there's also another musical in the 90s that I want to see come back, a small little musical called Haunted, that it should come back. Yes, very, very, like I said, I'm of a particular vintage and age, so I know these musicals, right? And then Ovidio Yu wrote one called Twist of Fate. Haunted was written by Ovidio Yu too. So again, there are these, and even Eleanor Wong wrote a musical called Corporate Animals back in the day, which I also watched. You're showing your age if you know Corporate Animals, right? It was at Jubilee Hall, I watched it, and even Eleanor Wong wrote a musical. Harish Sharma wrote 3, right? Okay, any final comments?
I just want to say that I was in the Kampong Amber. It's the first time I've heard the name for ages.
Well, I think anybody interested, producers out there, Kampong Amber is the musical that gave us that beautiful song called Bunga Sayang, which is in the 7 Letters movie, yeah? So if there are no more questions, I'd just like to draw your attention to this timeline that we have put on display. This is what we have put together as a kind of what happened in the year 2017 in terms of production. Now, it's not exhaustive. We're only covering local productions. So some of the bigger CFA productions, and obviously those that are the foreign touring musicals will not be included, local productions or staged by local theatre companies. And also in terms of the scope, school productions, art school production, tertiary institution, amateur players. So it is not exhaustive. But what we will do is starting from tomorrow to the end of January, we will put we will mount this in the front courtyard. So feel free to come and have a look at it. Feel free to scrutinize it, and if we've made a mistake, please let us know. We will alter it and we will change it. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us for the past hour, 15 minutes. All right. Theater is a wonderful thing. Please watch it. Go to it. 2018. I'll see you at SIFA.